Welcome to Eviliv Play, a celebration of my favorite tabletop role-playing games. This is a sister channel to Eviliv. Subscribe to the channel because today we are diving deep into tabletop role-playing game news with this episode covering Neon Odyssey Kickstarter, a new Ravenloft subclasses, LGBTQ plus TTRPG, and Free League Publishing Humble Bundle. So strap in. We got some stuff to talk about. All right, I would like to take a moment and thank the Patreon patrons and invite you to consider becoming a patron. You can even grab tabletop role-playing games and get $10 signing up to start playing games using my affiliate links in the description below. So that'll be a lot of fun. Let's dive in to a little news. First and foremost, talking about tabletop role-playing games on Start Playing, scrolling down to the games that I'm hosting. So I've got two campaign settings that I'm developing. One is Direlands, which is a dark fantasy system agnostic campaign setting. The other one is Eviliv3, which is a modern urban dark fantasy campaign setting, all like World of Darkness or something like that. Though it is different. Both of them are pretty system agnostic, but I use specific game systems in order to run them. I'm running a Dragonlance game right now, and I have Dragonlance games coming in the future. I'm running a Star Wars West End Games game right now, and I'm doing a Willow one here shortly, so that should be pretty interesting as well. So if you're ever interested in giving one of those different worlds, whether it's Star Wars, Willow, Dragonlance, Direlands, or Eviliv3 a shot, you always can. You can check out the link. Also, before we get to the news, there's this great fantasy anthology that I put together with a bunch of fantastic authors. It's called Dragons of Ash and Twilight. It is absolutely free in PDF, ebook, and audiobook formats. So go check that out. The link is in the description, but you can just hit dlsaga.com and find out more about that. It is a great anthology filled with wonderful fantasy worlds, some of them shared, some of them original, and yeah, a lot of great writing in it. Hope you enjoy it. All right, first and foremost, let's start with Neon Odyssey becomes the most funded tabletop role-playing game Kickstarter of all time. Eviliv3 Entertainment's nostalgia-fueled hope punk campaign setting smashes Kickstarter records. Now, if you thought Dungeons & Dragons and sci-fi didn't mix well, think again. After raising over $3 million on its first day, Neon Odyssey, the latest project from popular actual play group Eviliv3 Entertainment, just smashed Kickstarter records, surpassing $15.2 million in just 30 days, and becomes the most funded TTRPG in the platform's history. Imagine that. $15.2 million for something that they're just going to buy anyway. It's insane when you think about it. The secret behind Neon Odyssey's success are the names involved, let's be honest, and the fact that it's on the back of an established actual play show and all that stuff. But is that it's not trying to sell D&D with lasers. Previous attempts to adapt the famous fantasy tabletop role-playing game to sci-fi settings, such as the Spelljammer line of products, proves less than fruitful. All right, let's be fair. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition 2014 version with Spelljammer didn't go well because they shit the bed with the setting. Not because it wasn't a good idea, because you can go all the way back to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition Spelljammer, where it was wildly popular. So Spelljammer as a concept certainly worked well and did well. It's Spelljammer with 5th edition version that didn't do well. So Eviliv3 Entertainment instead focused on creating a fully fledged science fantasy space opera tinged with synthware and hopeful cyberpunk aesthetics and influenced by classics like Star Wars and Cowboy Bebop. So, who would have thought you steal the thunder from established IPs and people like it? See, in the industry, that's called borrowing equity. When they're like, no, this is going to be like Star Wars. You know that little indie IP. Oh yeah, and that hugely popular anime Cowboy Bebop. Yeah, it's like that too. Okay, well, you're not selling an original idea at that point. You're selling hugely popular ideas in a combined IP TTRPG. So that is not the same. And to try to compare that to Spelljammer with an infinitely smaller base, so clearly it's going to have a smaller success ratio, especially in the flopped version of 5th edition, it's totally unfair to compare the two. However, let's just do it anyway because it makes it fun, right? So it doesn't hurt that the project is offering a lot of content, with 3 big books totaling over 1,400 pages containing a cornucopia of new character options for Dungeons & Dragons 5.5 edition, that's the 2024 edition, or 1D&D, included more than 40 new subclasses and 30 unique species. And of course, lots of space monsters are ready to terrorize your players. All this will build a vibrant campaign setting called Stardust Rhapsody. You can get a taste of Neon Odyssey's vibes in the official AMV trailer, which has surpassed 2.5 million views on YouTube, of course accompanied by the notes of the catchy synthwave pop song. So why not? Let's give it a go.
Zepbound, watch this.
Okay, well let's watch this
Zepbound
drug
helps
commercial
adults with
first.
obesity lose weight and keep it off.
And then let's give it a go. Oh, wow, look at them putting on lipstick. They must have really benefited from that drug in order to put on lipstick. That's fascinating. Drug commercials are the worst. Absolute worst. And they all think that they're doing some sort of original new take. Hey, let's throw a narrative together and then do the commercial talking about the drug that way. No, it doesn't work. No one cares. No one enjoys it. Everyone hates it. All right, so honestly, this is hard to wrap our heads around, says Eviliv3 Entertainment co-founder Mikey Gilder in a news release. Neon Odyssey started as this big, ridiculous dream of building a massive science fiction fantasy universe for people to play in, and the community showed up for it in a way we'll never forget. We're incredibly grateful to every single backer who helped make this happen. This is the video. Very 80s. Anime is not 80s at all.
I was a dreamer drifting
The anime is very
in
modern.
an endless sky.
Critical Role.
Through echoes of 1,000 worlds and waves of cosmic fire.
I was the one just chasing shadows of the night. In a rhapsody of stardust, I was lost to space and time.
In your eyes, galaxy on fire. Journey through the darkness, you might find your heart's desire.
Roll the dice, your destiny unfolds. A symphony among the stars, a story yet untold.
Out among the stars, that's where you'll find me.
With starlight in your eyes, you set the world on fire.
Out among the
I
stars.
think that's it. All right, it's cute. It's Saturday morning cartoon in the 80s. I understand it. In the same announcement, Eviliv3 Entertainment also revealed that Dungeons & Dragons media veteran Todd Kendrick was officially joining their company as director of media. If you're not able to secure your copy of Neon Odyssey before the campaign ended on June 3rd, worry not, because the books will also become available through Eviliv3 Entertainment's web store. So that's it. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about this with another one of the news articles here in a second. But aesthetics alone does not make a successful tabletop role-playing game. It doesn't. Aesthetics will get you so far, but the game itself has to be fun and easy to adapt and enjoyable. And so this is a campaign setting. It's clearly sci-fi, Dungeons & Dragons 5.5 edition. So the game itself is building on an edition that's current, but arguably a lesser version of the D&D 5e game. So whenever they go from a number to a half number, it's because there's an evolution of the game itself. a rules correction or something. We saw this really clearly with 3 to 3.5 edition. In the case of 1st to 1.5, that was arguably with some splat books and, some hardcover books starting with like Oriental Adventures, bringing out non-weapon proficiencies, and then also like Dragonlance and stuff like that. But it was Unearthed Arcana. And so it added in new class features and stuff. And a lot of purists with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons think that broke the game because you extended it too much and it unbalanced classes. And then you go to 2nd edition, and then 2.5 edition added an insane amount of splat books and content, which fundamentally broke. They added like player kits and stuff, and it fundamentally broke the balance of the game as well. And then you go to 3 and 3.5, whereas 3.5 actually corrected the game system, but 3.5 spiraled out to min-maxing, and that was sort of what the game ended up being. And then you go to 4th edition, and everyone sort of threw it away. 5th edition became the most popular version of the game, full stop. And then 5.5, it actually like reduced the game instead of expanded it out, got rid of rules, stripped down the actual playability of it. And it actually, in my opinion, made a worse game when compared to the 2014 D&D 5 version. And they're leveraging that version for this Kickstarter, for this campaign setting. And I think that's a big mistake. You can easily adapt those rule sets and create your own campaign setting with your own system. And then it feels much more true to whatever that game is. You start adding it on to everything else that's already existed with 5.5, and it becomes sort of awkward to use, and you literally can't use D&D Beyond, or if you do, you have to limit other access to other books in order to have players use it. And it becomes like, in this age of playing online, which really is the greatest preponderance, in my opinion, of gaming nowadays, is online gaming, not in-house gaming, and certainly actual plays and live plays and stuff. That's where people are digesting this type of content. I just don't know if it has legs, because you would either have to have the physical books, or you would have to limit the rule set based on only this campaign settings books. And that can, again, be very limiting, confusing with the rules, confusing what player options are available for people watching and really understanding the world. And because it looks like it's a mishmash of other generic sci-fi stuffs, it doesn't feel true unto itself and original. It's an amalgamation. It's a motley assortment. It's a veritable cornucopia of other IPs. And so it doesn't feel true or honest or real. So yes, it made a ton of money based on the fact that it's writing Critical Role's game company. And that's why it became so successful. I think it's not going to have legs, and I think it's just going to die out like all the other ones, because there's nothing that's so true and original about it that keeps people coming back. Especially when you have games like Alien Evolved, in order to, and then all the third indie game companies and less successful sci-fi companies creating their own versions of sci-fi games. I don't know that this has legs. But what's important about that is that I don't think it matters. This is a cash grab by the company. They saw that they didn't have something in their portfolio, so they went out to fill that void. Based on the success of Critical Role and everything else that they've done thus far, it garnered an insane amount of Kickstarter support, and now they have that hole filled. And so that's kind of it. They came out with Candela Obscura to fill that Call of Cthulhu vibe. They came out with their own Critical Role stuff to fill the Dungeons and Dragons side. They came out with their own game system, Daggerheart, to fill the alt or indie versions of a D&D game vibe for all the people that were so upset with D&D. And now they're coming up with this to fill that sort of space vibe. I mean, they're just doing what any company would do when they're trying to do cash grabs. And there's going to be a point where they have to come to terms with, okay, well, these products clearly aren't successful. They're just supported. But does support mean success? Like, does initial out the gate support mean longevity and success and playability? Because isn't that the real reason why you make TTRPGs? Is the longevity and playability of it, that it spreads out and people are like, oh, have you played Neon Odyssey? It's so amazing. Let's get our group together. I will be stunned if that ends up happening. But fingers crossed for them. I don't want to wish failure on anyone. They clearly have the money, though they didn't need it for the Kickstarter, to get this thing published and to get it out there. So all success goes to them, and congratulations for doing it. Let's hope it's good enough that it does have legs. Let's hope that it's original enough, that it does carve out its own niche in the market, and it doesn't just ride on the name and no one plays it. They just have the book on their shelves. All right. Let me know what you think about this. Are you going to pick up Neon Odyssey? Did you back it? Why? I would love to hear justifications, not to justify your choices for me, but to let me understand what attracted to you, what attracted it to you. What about it drew you so much that you wanted to support it financially before it was released, rather than just buying the book once it is released? I'd love to hear from you. Thank you. All right, let's dive into the next story. Dungeons & Dragons new Ravenloft subclasses, the winners and losers. Dungeons & Dragons makes many welcome changes to its spookiest classes, but some are B-movie flops rather than scarefests. I don't know if this author realizes, but most timeless horror films were B-movie flops. They're called cult classics, and they end up being beloved. But I understand what they're trying to say. This year's D&D release schedule is fully in swing. D&D Beyond subscribers now have access to 2026's debut source book, Ravenloft, The Horrors Within. Spooky D&D fans get a lot of new tools to play with here. Most, though, are most excited to find how the new class options tick. I'm reading through the new Ravenloft book, and I've got plenty of strong opinions on the D&D classes. At first glance, though I'll be doing some build tinkering and testing before my full review, there are some clear winners and losers among the bunch. Winners. Spirits Bard. The College of Spirits was one of my least favorite options for the 5th edition Bard. The flavor was delightful and the role-playing opportunities were plentiful. However, the build was just so damned inconsistent. Tales from Beyond gave you a random buff in exchange for your bardic inspiration, while Spiritual Focus ignored how situational a buff to bard spells with material components was. The new College Bard is far more consistent. Spirits from Beyond swapping Tales for Spirits now lets you apply the random buff when you spend your bardic inspiration in the usual way. Plus, you can spend a bonus action and a die to pick the specific part of the table you want to activate. That's a big win in the strategy department. Some of those table options have been nerfed slightly, but it's a welcome rebalance nonetheless. At level 6, you still get to roll an extra d6 to buff a damage or healing spell, but you're no longer required to use your Arcana focus in that... Oh, sweet hell. In that spell's casting. The downside of this added flexibility is that the Spirit Bards can no longer use their level 6 subclass features to temporarily learn a new spell. Instead, you get a buffed version of the Spirit Guardians that's always prepared, castable for free once a day, and gives your allies half cover. That's not a bad trade-off. Loser? Reanimator Artificer. The Reanimator has seen so many buffs since it first appeared in playtesting. Jolt to Life now gives downed characters far more than a single hit point. Your reanimated companion has more hit points, a better strength score, and slightly more consistent damage output. You no longer get Revivify at a discount, but you can cast Raise Dead without its costly components. Despite this, I'm still not plussed by the subclass. The spell list, unchanging from playtesting, is pretty average. The companion's damage scale is slightly better, but it's still not an overwhelmingly force on the field. Yes, it's nice to my companion which has blind sight, but it still feels like a less effective Steel Defender companion. And that subclass got abilities that buffed my core character, not just my buddy. One of the biggest issues with D&D's companion subclass is they don't give the main character enough to play with, and the Reanimator has very little to get excited about until the higher tiers of play. Winner, Hollow Warden Ranger. The brand new Ranger subclass was extremely popular during playtesting, but it's changed a lot since. Many of these changes could be considered nerfs. Your Wrath of the Wild armor class is significantly diminished. Spiked Growth has been axed from an already excellent spell list, and the chance to deal damage with Rot and Violence is gone. It's not all bad, though. In fact, this is still a subclass I'm championing at the bit to play. I'm chomping at the bit to play. Champing? Champing? Is that like a word play or a mistake? Spike Growth has been swapped for Steel Wind Strike at the highest levels. Hungering Might is untouched, and Wrath of the Wild no longer requires you to concentrate on Hunter's Mark to maintain its benefits. Plus, Wrath of the Wild now gives us a free opportunity attack when a creature in melee damages your allies. Rot and Violence now limits reactions and health regeneration, while Ancient Endurance no longer costs a spell slot to bring you back from 0 hit points. The Hollow Warden certainly feels a little different from its first draft, but it remains a contender for one of the best Ranger subclasses. Winner, Phantom Rogue. The Phantom Rogue was a mid-card subclass for me in its original 5e form. It was a flavorful and picked up some excellent powers after a few tiers of play, but it was far from the best rogue option. This is still true, in fact. Very little about the subclass has changed for 5.5e, but the changes that have been made are some welcome quality of life tweaks. Your early abilities are identical, but 9th level features Tokens of the Departed is much more generous. You now automatically start each day with 2 soul trinkets, or more at high levels, though you can still create some up to your maximum through the usual reaction after killing a foe. Your trinkets can now be destroyed to cast Augury, rather than to create its own unique method of Spirit Commune. Plus, you can now cast Speak with the Dead, without a spell slot, once per rest, targeting a regular corpse or target one of your own trinkets. The last major change is to your capstone, Death's Friend. You regain a trinket when you roll initiative rather than at the end of a long rest, which is handy for those moments when you haven't killed anyone in a while. Winner, Shadow Sorcerer. The Shadow Sorcerer is one of the trickiest subclasses to place in the category of winner or loser. Its early features have been buffed, with Eyes of the Dark now offering Blind Sight and Strength of the Grave offering significantly more healing power, but things get a little trickier when we consider the subclass's flagship ability, Hound of Three Omen. Originally, this allowed you to spend 3 sorcery points to summon a modified Direwolf. Your pet came with temporary hit points, could move through other creatures and objects, and always knew where a particular target was, even if they were hiding. Now, this feature lets you cast Summon Beast without spell prep or material components in exchange for 3 sorcery points. That comes with pros and cons. Creatures within 5 feet of your summoned creature have disadvantage on saves against your spells. Yay! Your buddy is no longer incorporeal or hunting a specific target. Boo. And unless you choose the flying option from Summon Beast, its speed significantly reduced. Also, boo. However, Summon Beast gives your buddy multi-attack, yay, and better strength score, yay, and more strategic flexibility, yay. I wanted to test the subclass out further before I'm certain, but my first impression is that it's more of a win for Shadow Sorcery than it is a loss. Loser, Undead Warlock. The Undead was already a forgettable subclass option thanks to its relatively disappointing damage output. Now, D&D has decided to make it worse by nerfing many of its features. Taking this book in isolation, this just looks like a shift Shadow Sorcerer. Spells like Phantom Steed and Death Ward have been axed from the spell list, differentiating the Warlock from other Ravenloft subclasses, but making it weaker in the process. Form of Dread is entirely unchanged, except you squeeze in a few more uses per day. Grave Touched is the only feature that gets significantly better, allowing you to bypass necrotic resistance and ignore exhaustion levels. And it's downhill from here, though. Necrotic Husk heals you better when it picks you up, but the damage you deal with it is now locked behind a Constitution saving throw, and it has a worse base modifier. On the bright side, you can now use it once per day rather than 1d4 long rests time. Lastly, there's Spirit Projection, which is identical, except it no longer allows you to regain hit points when dealing necrotic damage. If this has been a broken subclass before, I might have understood, but I feel like the forgettable has just become even more forgettable. Winner, Grave Cleric. I've always had a soft spot for the Grave domain. An all-rounder of a cleric subclass, there's obviously drawbacks to this update built in the 5.5e system, namely that you don't get any of your features until level 3. But overall, I think the tweaks that have been made here are a net good for the subclass. It sucks to lose Bane and Anti-Life Shell from the spell list, and we no longer have the Eyes of the Grave ability, but I'll live. especially when I consider the Circle of Mortality now deals a pinch of extra damage when you hurt a creature that's already missing hit points. One of the more contentious changes is those made to Path to the Grave. The previous version could give a target vulnerability to an attack damage, while this one just gives you the chance to deal extra radiant or necrotic damage. That sounds like a nerf, but the range of the feature has been doubled. Plus, the curse you place gives the target disadvantage on attack rolls and saves until you trigger the damage. Sentinel at Death's Door now only applies to bloodied creatures, but it also halves incoming damage as well as canceling any critical hits. And as for your capstone, Keeper of Souls restores HP equal to twice your cleric level rather than the hit dice of the enemy. The Grave Cleric subscribes to 5.5e's overwhelmingly prevalent design philosophy: reliable characters are the most fun. Got your own opinions? Let us know. All right, so this new Ravenloft book was... I don't know, was it much anticipated? I think people were really excited to get a new Ravenloft update to the subclasses for 5.5e, because before that, they just had the Ravenloft Adventure and Van Richten's Guide. So that was all 2014 5th edition rather than the 2024 5.5 edition. And so Wizards of the Coast / Dungeons & Dragons hasn't been doing a very good job at updating all their old subclasses to the new edition at an exponential rate. And I think that's the biggest complaint. And it's also why people look forward to these books being released, because they want those updates. But when you do update them and you nerf the characters from what they were to what they are, you have to ask why. So it would be really nice if there was some sort of designer justification for the subclasses on why you boosted some skills or you dropped some other skills or sort of nerfed them. And maybe there is on D&D Beyond, and I just haven't seen it when it comes to subclass per subclass. But I think that would, one, it would help the community who's playing the game and playing these subclasses and wanting them to understand your reasoning. But also, just at home games, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to play it the way that it's presented. You could use the old version or just make changes as you see fit as a dungeon master in order to make it work better for your home game. And it seems like most of the people who critique this stuff seem to forget that aspect of it. You do not have to rely on someone else's interpretation of something to enjoy that something or play that something. You can just do your own. Now, of course, that idea means you don't have to buy everything that's been released, and that, of course, hurts D&D's bottom line, but it should actually embolden you as a dungeon master and player to make up your own stuff and not rely on a release schedule in order to play a specific character. Just do it yourself and have some fun. All right, I've always loved Ravenloft. I never played 5th edition version of Ravenloft. I have only played 2nd edition Ravenloft, and I played the hell out of it back in the day. Now, of course, so like I've run Dareguard Keep twice. I've run the 2nd edition Night of the Black Rose. When Black Roses Bloom is what it's called. And loved it. Absolutely love it. I think Ravenloft is a great campaign setting, but I just don't know that this Dungeons & Dragons 5.5 is the best game system to run it. Ravenloft was always something that was incredibly difficult, and it modified everything very specifically. So to have sort of generic, your subclasses are tailored to the setting, but are the rule sets tailored to the setting as well? I'm hoping they are, but I don't have the book, so I'm not entirely sure. And I suspect they're probably not, just so that it'll fit with the generic 5.5 ecosystem. But let me know. Are you excited about these subclasses? Did you play them? Are they iterations of the old 2014 5th edition subclasses? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Ravenloft is always such a special campaign setting. I love horror, so if that's all we've got with D&D, then let's celebrate it, right? All right, next up, Columbus Game Designer comes out while making new LGBTQ plus tabletop role-playing game. I'm finally planting a flag with who I am as a designer, by Ben Jodway. Okay, so In her new tabletop role-playing game, Columbus-based Chris Sellers asked players to transport themselves to ancient Mesopotamia and defy the gods in control of their lives. Players rebel against powerful entities through friendship, romance, and exploring their queer identities, something Sellers experienced herself multi-classing as a trans and bisexual woman while designing the game. You get to fight back, and you get to fight back with your intimate connections with other people, and you get to win, said Sellers, who runs Hectic Electron Games. Although she didn't have politics in mind when she created the game, called aptly Defy the Gods, she said, "I'm glad that if we had to be in this time, that I get to come out with a game like this." Sellers was introduced to the world of tabletop role-playing when she was 12 years old, growing up in Northern Virginia. She and her brother got the first edition of Dungeons & Dragons for Christmas. She reconnected with D&D at Reed College in Portland, Oregon in the early 90s as an art major and began to explore her bisexuality, though she hadn't yet explored her gender identity. She published supplements for the game, like her own adventure books, which game masters, GMs, used to run campaigns for players. After college, Sellers moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, making 2D art for video games at the 3DO company until it ran aground in 2003. 5 years later, Sellers followed her partner to Columbus after her partner got a new job. They married, and Sellers lived a mostly heteronormative life, working in web design and IT. In 2021, she published her first indie tabletop role-playing game, Raccoon Sky Pirates. "It was very gratifying, and I sold enough of those that I got ambitious," Sellers said. Defy the Gods is inspired by queer TTRPGs like Thirsty Sword Lesbians and Monster Hearts, borrowing the latter's flirtation mechanics, she said. Sellers began working on the game in 2019 when she was as far removed from her queerness as she's ever been. She has gone through a death in her family and wanted to create something full of life, and also expressed to explore her queer identity more by designing her idea of a perfect D&D game. But after 4 years of working on it, the game still wasn't particularly queer. While demonstrating the game to possible publishers, Sellers said one told her that they were not seeing queer themes. The comment encouraged her to strengthen the queer factor in her designs. As she sharpened those themes, Sellers said she realized that something that felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. The last character that I wrote, called the Revenant, who's a fugitive from the underworld, they're not who they used to be in a past life or when they were dead, and they're figuring out who they are now, Sellers said. And I was writing it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm talking about myself. Oh my God, I'm trans. It lets you just tell a story. Sellers wanted to make a game closer to the classic sword and sorcery gameplay seen in D&D, but rather than overdone Western European analogs, she was inspired by Bronze Age civilizations like ancient Sumer and Babylon, and took care to avoid Orientalist tropes seen in movies like 300. The concept is played in ancient Mesopotamia under the despotic rule of the gods. Throughout the game, player characters grow relationships with each other, both romantically and platonic, before finally becoming strong enough to overthrow the gods with their own godlike powers. It's a world where jealous gods and cruel tyrants want to destroy you, and you fight against those gods with the hearts that you share with your friends and loved ones, she said. Those hearts leave you vulnerable, but they keep you human, because the other way that you fight against the gods is by embracing your own monstrous godlike power and rising to oppose them as equal. In a way, it's her version of D&D, but it uses simpler game mechanics through a system called Powered by the Apocalypse. Players roll fewer dice and do less math to focus more on storytelling, juicy relationships, and messy romance rather than tactical combat. It lets you just tell a story, she said. After coming out while developing Defy the Gods, Sellers says she's begun to move through life with authenticity, honesty, and community, even though she's barely keeping up. There's a rich community of trans tabletop designers talking about their trans and queer experiences in their work, and coming out lets me participate, Sellers said. With Defy the Gods, I'm finally planting a flag as who I am as a designer. In my own small way, I'm hoping I'm contributing to that conversation. Let me first start by just saying, that's awesome. I think being seen in games is important. And I understand that injecting your own version of reality and life and identity and sexuality in an established game system is entirely doable, and you can absolutely do it. finding a group of people with like mind to share in that expression can be incredibly challenging. And you can sort of compare and contrast this with just running a romance game in Dungeons and Dragons as an example. It is awkward, it does not always play out, and players do not really get into it generally. Of course, every individual game is going to ebb and flow with how that works, and whether it's two, people who are just not attracted to each other playing those love interests, or, you just don't have that dynamic back and forth, or whether you're strangers or something. It doesn't really connect and, make logical sense in the context of role playing. So creating your own game with those mechanics in mind for a community that would then celebrate it, I think, is a great way of expressing one's identity and sexuality and telling narratives within those constructs. So I think this is what I was talking about when I was referencing the earlier Eviliv3 game, where they're building something on top of D&D 5.5. This is saying, well, that just doesn't really work, so I'm going to create my own system. So this speaks to a specific audience that has a specific vision and wants a specific experience. The other speaks to someone who might be interested in running that type of a game once or twice, but really it's D&D 5.5 that they're interested in. And that's a huge difference when it comes to longevity of play. So I think the people who this game will speak to will definitely play this infinitely more than those if she would have, for example, tried to create a campaign setting for D&D 5.5 with these sensibilities. It just would not have resonated as well. It would not have the lifespan, and it would not really work. Again, I don't want to see anyone fail, so I hope this actually succeeds, and I hope it goes off and really speaks to the audience that she's targeting and that she sees success with it. And I gotta say, while I don't really connect with the identity or sexuality in the context of a TTRPG, I do really like the sound of the setting itself. I think that's fascinating that you're in this ancient Mesopotamia timeline where the gods are actually running things and you have to stand up against them using your combined friendships in order to do so. Conceptually, I think that's really cool. But again, you're going to limit your audience who might like the concept of the game because they might not identify with queer or LGBTQ or that gender or sexual presentation with the game itself. And so it's a bit of a catch-22 when you're dealing with stuff like this. You're either speaking solely to a group and thereby, by default, unfortunately, ostracizing others that might be interested in the concept, but not the detail minutia, or you're trying to cater it to a large audience and thereby losing your core group that you're trying to speak to. It is a very difficult thing to come out with an indie TTRPG that speaks to everyone and then will then be successful. And the people that have done it, they do come out with very hyper-specific methodologies or campaign settings or character class settings or, just tropes that really fill a niche that don't exist as of yet. I think the audience that is going to be connecting with this, especially with the queer sword and sorcery theme, is going to eat it up. They're going to love it, and they're going to find success with it. At least I hope they do. So all of this is to say, if you're thinking about creating your own TTRPG or campaign setting, let's try to find some originality with presentation, understand who you're designing it for, the audience, and don't try to make something that's going to work for every sensibility because it's just not going to make sense to any sensibility. Find your core audience, and this is marketing 101, and speak to that core audience like this one does. All right. Well, let me know what you think. Is this a game that you would give a shot? Even if you're not LGBTQIA+, would you just to see what it's like? Give it a go. Do a one-shot or something. Let me know in the comments. And if you are LGBTQ+, is this something that you've been waiting for? Are you excited to give this a shot? Let me know in the comments. Love to hear what you have to say. All right, we're going to close out our news with Free League's RPG Collection Humble Bundle. Now, there's a lot of games in here that I've heard a lot of great things about that I've just never really considered buying, but now that it's under a Humble Bundle, I'm really sort of wanting to do so. So, fresh TTRPGs by Free League Publishing. Ready to spice up your TTRPG collection with the hottest titles from Free League Publishing? Unlock the core set of Dragonbane, an exhilarating classic fantasy game full of magic, mystery, and adventure that offers mirth and mayhem role-playing, aka hearty laughs and brutal challenges. Or Brave Mutant Year Zero, a post-apocalyptic tale of humanity's crawl back from the streets turned graveyards as godlike mutants roam the wasteland. Try these or Vaesen, a wicked secret, all for a price you choose, and help support Direct Relief with your purchase. So what is the Direct Relief? Let's find out really quick. So where's the Direct Relief? I want to know about the people that it's benefiting, damn it. All right, founded in 1948, Direct Relief is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that has become one of the world's largest providers for medical relief in the world. Direct Relief works with healthcare professionals and organizations on the ground, establishing partnerships with local organizations that provide health services to people who have otherwise not received them. So 50 states, 70 countries. All right, so it's a good cause. And to get everything, I think you have to pay at least $30. But sweet hell, look at everything you're getting. So let me look and see. So that's still everything at $25. Okay, so $25 is the minimum to get everything. But look at what you're getting. Now, I heard Vaesen is an award-winning game, Nordic horror role-playing. I've heard a whole bunch of indie reviewers saying how wonderful it was. A lot of people are saying Dragonbane is a great game to introduce people to TTRPGs, which makes me want to try it just to see what it's like. I love the mirth and mayhem concept. It just reminds me of how I used to play D&D when I had the basic set as a kid, running it with my brother, sister, and all of my middle school friends, even into high school, actually. Mutant Year Zero, never played it. Not sure that's really a game for me, but still sounds kind of cool. I've never heard of Symbarorum. I don't know what that means. I wish there was like a... Symbarorum invites you to join the adventure, explore the vast forest of Davakar in the hunt for treasure, lost wisdom, and fame. So it sounds like a fable-based game. Interesting. I wonder what the difference would be between Symbarorum and Vaesen. And then, of course, Forbidden Lands, which is also an award winner. That looks pretty damn good to me. A new take on a classic fantasy role-playing. In this open-world survivor game, you're not heroes set on a mission dictated by others. Instead, you're raiders and rogues bent on making your own mark on the cursed world. That's cool. Huh. Electric State role-playing game. It's a game about a group of travelers heading out on a journey through a strange America in an alternate 1997. The 90s were great. Ugh, I love the 90s. Had a good time. I love the 80s too. Let's see. So yeah, Mutant Year Zero, Symbarorum, Dragonbane, Twilight 2000, Mutant Year Zero, Vaesen, and Electric State seem to be what you're going to be picking up. I've never played any of these, but this is for $25 to get all of these is a great deal. So I would love to hear from you guys. Have you played these TTRPGs? I guess I could have just looked here to see how much you had to pay for all of them. I'm clearly an idiot who cannot read. Are you familiar with Free League RPG Publishing? Let me know in the comments. Do you suggest this? Is this something worth trying? Doing one-shots or just exploring and reviewing? I'd love to hear what you have to say. Let's see, how long is this going to go? Is there a timeline on this? Offer ends in 11 days. So you've got 11 days to consider picking up this wonderful collection. And they're award-winning games. So that's the other part of this. This isn't just someone putting something out that is just sort of a flash in the pan. This is a publishing group that has put out award-winning game after award-winning game. So you know they got chops. So that's interesting to me. That makes me want to try it all the more. All right. Let me know what you guys think about Free League and if you have a favorite TTRPG within their catalog. All right. Well, my friends, that is going to do it. Thank you so much for watching today's Evil Live Play news episode. I hope you subscribe and ring the bell if you're new to the channel. Don't forget to click the like button and comment to let others learn about this celebration of tabletop role-playing games. Thank you to creator patron Aaron Hardy, D. Robert Handy, producer patron David Galindo, and developer patrons Chris Androu and Sam Ruiz. And as always, remember that evil spelled backwards is live. So get out there and be evil.